This is the Outlaw Apostle Podcast. I'm the host, Troy Neff. I'm the fucking guy. Let's go. I am ready. Another Monday morning, and we are live here at our desert home studio in sunny Queens Creek, Arizona. It is a beautiful, beautiful morning. And what a great week we had last week. It was a meltdown for some people last week, almost daily, which it seems to be on a pretty regular basis now. But definitely a good week for MAGA and the MAGA leader, the orange man himself, President Trump. So what I want to start with is, this is funny. This is from a couple days ago on Fox, that this is like Senator Kennedy is one of the funniest senators. He probably is. I'm just going to crown him as the funniest senator. And I love when he describes shit. He does it in such a common sense way. It is so fucking good. I just love it. And he's not my senator, but he is our senator, right? He is absolutely fantastic. So we're going to play about 4 minutes of this. It's worth listening to because, well, it's funny, and it has to do with the votes and everything that happened this past weekend, getting this big, beautiful bill passed. So let's go to the video.
Louisiana now. Chad, thank you for the report. And Senator, what does this weekend really entail? Maybe one or two sticking points that you think you can iron out.
Well, here's where I think we are, Harris. Look, I believe in teamwork. It gives you somebody to blame. But at some point, you've got to make a decision. Now, our quarterbacks are John Thune and Mike Crapo. They're both rock stars. They're trying to make everybody happy. It can't be done. We have cussed and discussed and rediscussed. We need to start voting. Everybody needs to adult real hard, and the jackassery has to stop. I have encouraged John and Mike to tell everyone, look, we're going to start voting tomorrow at noon. If you're not happy, offer an amendment. We'll have a full amendment process. But here's the bottom line. In any legislation of this magnitude, some people are just going to have to settle for a ham and egg sandwich without the ham. That's just the nature of the beast. And I think that if you put everybody to the test and say, look, this is why God made votes, it's time, vote, I think the bill will pass.
All right, so you gave us key information about that vote tomorrow, and then if that doesn't pass in the Senate, then you'll go back and you'll make some amendments. This is something that I've been talking with Republican House members about, particularly Mike Lawler here in New York City, who wants a SALT deduction cap to be raised. And it's become, I understand, a point of contention getting this bill across the finish line and onto the president's desk. I talked with Lawler last week on The Focus. Here's a bit of that.
The $10,000 cap is not something that I can support. And I've been very clear from the moment that I ran for Congress that I would never support a tax bill that doesn't adequately lift the cap on SALT.
Senator, where are you on this one? Because if it goes back to the House, Congressman Lawler told me, I mean, you need 218. He won't be part of that. So they'll fall short in the House.
Well, I love Congressman Lawler. I respect Congressman Lawler. But he and about 4 of his colleagues are demanding that the American people spend over $300 billion, not million, $300 billion to make them happy. And that is unacceptable. If the congressman wants to vote against the bill, have at it. But it's time to vote. I think I wouldn't make any changes to the SALT provisions. I wouldn't. And if you're unhappy with that, vote against it or fill out a hurt feelings report. But it's time to vote.
Those state and local taxes that blue states, there are only 5 of them, 5 members, I should say, who represent in those blue states who are pushing for this. And
it's they want us to spend over $300 billion to make them happy. And they say they'll vote no if we don't. I say, let's don't do it. And if they want to vote for the largest tax increase in American history, they've got to do what they've got to do, but they better be prepared for the consequences.
Well, you have a long weekend ahead of you.
There you
and
go.
The goal for
that
Monday.
wraps it up. The 2 best, though, is jackassery. I'm going to start working into my regular comments and language when I address people. I like jackassery. And you're going to get a ham and egg sandwich without the ham. Dude, that's so beautiful, though. But, he makes the complex understandable with that kind of stuff. I love it.
Definitely dumbs it down for a lot of
He
people. Makes
dumbs
it nice and
it down
easy for people.
Yeah, and the thing is, people do this to Trump, too, where they accuse Trump of not being very smart because of the language that he uses sometimes. Not with, and Trump dumbs things down. Trump can be funny and is very humorous, too. Not quite this way with these, little Southern
comments and stuff like that. The jokes in there.
Yeah, the comments. But it's basically the same idea. And it's there's a reason you do that. It's not because the person talking is dumb, but it's just a realization that you have to be honest that for the general public, 50%? The numbers are crazy. How many people that graduate, we'd have to do a search and we won't do it now, but how many people that graduate at grade level, or a reading grade level at the 12th grade? Dude, there are people graduating high school that can't read beyond a 6th grade level. Those are just the facts. Now, that may be happening more in inner cities than rural areas or wherever, but it doesn't matter. It's still our population. And the idea is to communicate to everybody and to do it in a way, and here, the way he does it, he's not talking down to anyone in doing this. It's just funny. But Trump, takes shit for that sometimes, and but he takes shit for everything. Let's just be honest. That's just the way it is. But I want to get into more of this bill because it is going to be voted on today. They might actually even be doing that right now, where they are calling it a vote-a-rama. I don't know if they ever used the term vote-a-rama in previous times when they've voted on, budget legislation and things like that. But that's what they're calling it. And it's a period of time now where they're going to be adding or proposing amendments to the bill and voting on those amendments. And then when they're finally done with that, they will vote it up or down. And if it's passes, it still has to go back to the House one more time. So the House started first, sent their bill to the Senate. The Senate made their changes. They're saying it's the same bill, but with changes. They'll vote on that, send it back to the House. If it passes the House, then the president will sign it. The goal is by July 4th, although Trump has backed off, I guess, his demand or his want of wanting it done by 4th of July. For political purposes, for, just I can see why he wants it done by July 4th. He wants to tweet about it. Okay? No, he does. He wants to tweet about it. He wants to say, this is the best fucking July 4th and ever. We've saved the American people from 60, from a 68% increase in their taxes. And like, it makes sense, for him to want to do that. So hopefully that happens. It looks like they're trying to make it happen. Ultimately, he just wants it done, so if it happened on July 8th or July 6th, I mean, obviously people are going to want to go home to their families for a couple days, but that also is what they're doing to kind of pressure things right now, right? They're trying to use, that looming holiday as, look, y'all want to get out of town, don't you? Let's get this done. Let's get it done. We've done this, we've done that. And what I really think is a shame, and some people might be surprised that I'm going to say this, but I'm actually very, very disappointed that Democrats didn't even try to participate in this. Now, both sides have been guilty of this for a while now, whenever they've been the majority party and in charge, and just kind of running over the minority party at the time and not including them. It would really be nice to get, back to the point we used to be, where they didn't all agree, but, where you could get 5 to 10 votes from the other side, where you could find a way to come together, where the people in the middle of both parties helped facilitate that kind of stuff. And we just don't see that anymore. It's one or two defections from each party. And that's the maximum usually on the Republican side is like 3. There's 3 in particular. On the Democrat side, there's only 1 really right now, and that's Fetterman. They had a couple of others. They had Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, who are no longer there, and they would vote how they wanted to vote, and not necessarily always with the party that they were with. Now you have Fetterman that does that. On the Republican side, you have this Tillis from North Carolina doing it now, and Rand Paul. And I like Rand, mostly. I like a lot of how he fought, and as far as the COVID shit that went on and trying to hold people accountable. I loved hearing him in the hearings when he would question people about that kind of stuff. When it comes to war and budget things, he's on a different plane. I get it. I actually really do get it, because I'm in the camp of wanting more cuts, and that's a shame too. Neither party, and I'm willing to acknowledge that about the Republicans, neither party really wants to make cuts. No matter what you hear about this bill and the cuts to, Medicaid and things like that, there's really not a lot of cuts. And even the cuts in Medicaid, as I've been trying to dig in as best I can, because if you pull up an article about it, if you're just average American pulling up an article about it, it'll give a point of view and kind of describe that there's going to be these Medicaid cuts, and that it's going to affect hospitals, and that it's rural hospitals, and that so many people, I've heard the 5 million number, I've heard 8 million, 11 million, and 15 and 16 million. Those are all the different numbers I've heard, that's how many people are going to get kicked off of Medicaid. We're going to kick off kids. We're going to kick off old people. We're going to, anybody, Republicans are just mean, and they're going to kick all these people off. Nobody, not in these articles, don't tell you how that's going to happen. Nobody tells you. And when you question, which I do on X, when you question these senators that are saying this, mostly from the Democratic Party, they don't explain it either. I just want an explanation of how. How is this going to happen? How are people going to get kicked off? And here's the best I can come up with, with me digging deeper. What's really happening is requirements are changing. And some of the requirements, it is a bigger change. But it doesn't mean that somebody's going to get kicked off. It means that people are going to have to do paperwork. And they're assuming that you're getting free benefits, right? You're getting some kind of health care benefit or food stamps or whatever. You're getting some kind of benefit from the government helping you out because of your financial situation. Look, I get it. But you're going to be required to prove certain things. You're going to have to, prove now that you're working 20 hours a week. And you either work 20 hours a week for an employer or you can donate it. So you could donate your time to a church, to homeless shelter. That really you have a lot of things you could do, and maybe that will lead for you a job down the road or whatever. And who are we making do this? Not everybody is being made to do this. Pregnant women aren't being made to do it. Women with multiple small children aren't being made to do it. That's not a thing. It's able-bodied, and especially targeting able-bodied single men. They're the ones being targeted for this, to do these work requirements. And let me tell you, in the real world, do you know the single guy that is getting Medicaid that's, 28 years old and supposedly he's broke, he don't have a job? He's a drug dealer using Medicaid for his health insurance. That's the thing. That's what's literally happening. I promise that's what's happening. But requiring people, why is that a bad thing? Some people think that's a bad thing? Or why do some people think that people are incapable of filling out the paperwork to be able to do this? That's they're not. Well, especially somebody who isn't going to be required to do the 20 hours. You got all the fucking time in the world, brother. Fill out the paperwork. That's not a bad thing. So to say all these people are going to get kicked off. Now, they do say you have two camps, okay? One camp says we're also trying to remove illegal aliens from the Medicaid rolls. And others say, well, it's illegal for people to get Medicaid if they're an illegal alien, so they're not getting it. What is true is, yes, it is illegal, but some are getting it anyways. The government worked hard to try to get people, on disability or some other kind of thing that were illegal aliens to get payments for the government. That was just how they operated the government under the Biden administration. And these are facts. This shit's not my opinion. These are just facts of things that have gone on and that have happened. So it's not about kicking people off or wanting to kick people off. And it's just setting limits, requiring people to have to do something to get food assistance or whatever. These programs were meant to be temporary to help someone out who's down on their luck. I'm not against that. I am against doing it for an unlimited period of time. And what we've seen in this country, if you're old enough or if you're smart enough to look into it, we've had generational poverty. You know how they talk about generational wealth and people want to build generational wealth now? We've also had generational poverty because here's the thing. These handouts keep people poor if you don't have a way to wean them off of it. So that you want to have a way where as they make more income, they're maybe getting a little less benefit, but you don't want to do it in a way where they say, man, I can't take this full-time job. If I take this full-time job, I'm not going to have the benefits that I had before, and I'm going to end up with less money. You got to find a way to wean off and balance that out and get people out into being a productive member of society. I want the best for everyone. And the best thing to do, look, I'm all for giving you, if you're hungry, I'm all for giving you some fish. But I don't want to have to give you fish every day. What I would prefer to do is give you fish and at the same time teach you how to fish. That's the differences in the party. One of the things that I said, somebody had posted something and basically questioning Christians and, why Christians are against, I don't know, giving poor people food, basically, that kind of thing. And my response was, look, here's the difference, in socialism, being about socialism as well. What socialism does is takes from somebody else and then gives it to this person over here for food, assistance, whatever. On the Christian side, you're required to do it yourself. That's the difference. The difference is being forced to by the government or you doing it. We're not against helping people. Some of the best work done around the world, has been done by religious organizations. Does that mean there's, never been fraud in some religious organization? Dude, there's fraud everywhere. But they have done a much better job of getting assistance to poor people around the world than about anybody else. So, that's just kind of a view on it. But so my thing on and people don't understand the difference between Medicaid and Medicare either. Being someone who was in the financial business for 24 years, and I actually specialized in Medicaid asset protection planning. So I would help mom and dad not lose their house and their $50,000 they had to get health care. That's one of the things I did as a financial advisor, and I was an expert in the area. And I was as good or better than any attorney, although I had to work with some attorneys and tell them what to do as far as legal paperwork went. But here's the difference. Medicare is the health insurance program for people 65 and over. It's for everyone. Everyone 65 and over. And it's mandatory. Now there's supplemental and that kind of stuff, but it's mandatory. Everybody goes on Medicare at 65. Medicaid is health insurance for people who are poor. So people who are below the poverty line are going to qualify for Medicaid. It's only for seniors, because when they said, it's going to kick, these reductions in Medicaid are going to kick seniors off, it's not going to kick seniors out, because the only way a senior citizen is getting Medicaid is if they're in a nursing home and they're broke. If they've used up all their own money and resources, all right, then Medicaid will step in and pay the bill. So let's say as a senior citizen, you're getting $1,500 a month from Social Security. Well, the nursing home is going to take that $1,500 and your bill is $4,500, right? So Medicaid is going to pay that other $3,000. And then you have to be in a Medicaid approved facility. And not all nursing home facilities are Medicaid approved, or accept Medicaid patients. Some people who can afford their own care or who have long-term care insurance want a more private place, and to pay for their own care, they want it to be nicer, and they pay for that being nicer. Okay, but I've been in all types of facilities. There's very good private facilities and mediocre private facilities. There are very good Medicaid facilities, and there are very shitty Medicaid facilities that are nursing homes. And some of them do both. They take private money, and then again, once somebody runs out of money, because usually a lot of people come into the nursing home, they have a little bit of something. And maybe that'll last like 6 months and they run out. And then that's when Medicaid would step in. And there's nothing in this bill that's going to kick people out of nursing homes or cut people off from these benefits. It's not in there. It's not going to happen. I've dug in to try to find what exactly is really, really changing. Now, there is a part of this that I'm going to be honest with you, I don't understand. And I believe I could understand it if I could talk to somebody who had more knowledge on it. And that's how all of this reimbursement goes for Medicaid and these rural hospitals seems to be an issue. And they call it a provider tax. I'm just being honest. I don't understand that. And so apparently there's an issue with that. I believe ultimately it'll if there is a negative impact, I think they'll work down the road to fix it, because I don't think it's an issue for many congressmen on both sides. Does that make sense? Because you have congressmen, in the Senate, in the House, that represent people in rural areas. They're not all Republicans, okay, that represent those people. So that's the only part about it that I'm really not understanding is that part. Yeah. See what I was saying there? Yeah, I don't understand the reimbursement thing for the hospitals. Or like I said, that provider tax, or they're changing the formula or something. That means the hospitals are going to get less money. Maybe the hospital will have to tighten its belt a little bit too and operate efficiently like any other business. I don't know. But, I can dig into that. Other than that's the only part of the whole thing that now we have also the SALT, and that's state and local taxes. That's been an issue. And you heard Senator Kennedy speak on that. That was changed in President Trump's bill in 2017, that there's a cap on it. There is a cap on it at $10,000 for the deduction. They want to raise it to $40,000 for people who it starts to phase out, I believe. It either phases out at $500,000 of income or starts to phase out at $500,000 of income. But you got to understand that this is mainly for people on the coast. This is for people that live in LA and New York City, where it's very, very expensive to live. And, $100,000 income in New York City, you are not living well. You're just not. Okay. You can live decent in middle America on $100,000. You'll be okay. That's not a thing, in New York City or in LA. So it's really there. And it's also states that have very high state taxes too. So some people don't want to feel like they don't really want to help that much on this, help individuals, because to them it feels like the state is being mismanaged and the taxes are so high that they're passing on to their people. And now they're asking the federal government to basically, with this deduction, help them out. And what some people in Washington want is for these states to get their shit together more, and especially the Californias and New York, right? I can see that. Is it big one way or another? I don't know. The only thing that I haven't heard anything about that I did hear about in the 2017 bill and you're not going to hear another motherfucker on the planet talk about this, is it was taxing hedge fund managers. So hedge fund managers pay taxes more like capital gains taxes and stuff on managing the money. And they're managing the money. That's really income. That should be for them. And these are wealthy billionaires. And that's the one part I do agree on, taxing billionaires. And billionaires, it's a specific group of billionaires that are paying lower taxes. They're paying their taxes because that's what the law is. And Trump wanted to change that back in 2017. And obviously, with the power of Wall Street got to Congress and they took that out. And this time around, they haven't even mentioned it. And none of you people even remember it from back then. Okay, I promise you don't. And I don't even know how many Congress people know, but I would have been okay with that kind of an increase on wealthy people. But I've also looked this up, and I challenge anyone, help me out. If I'm wrong, help me out. Send it to me. Where is the new tax cuts? Where are the new tax cuts for wealthy people in this bill? The biggest part of this bill when it comes to taxes is simply keeping the 2017 tax cuts in place. Because to get it passed, everyone had to agree that it was going to sunset in the future, right? And then you would have to kicking the can down the road, right? And they do that for budget purposes is why they do that, because it's going to be this expensive and this and that. And yeah, giving you your money back is something people in Washington think is an expense. Get that, right? It's so crazy. It's so crazy. But I don't see it in there. I do not see any increases in taxes, or I'm sorry, any increase in tax cuts for wealthy people. It's basically keeping everything the same as it is now, and middle class people benefited. They were the biggest beneficiaries when this was originally passed in 2017. Now it's just making it permanent. And so what changes are in there? The changes that are in there are mostly, there's three things: overtime, no tax on tips, and there's a deduction because it was the only way they could do it for seniors. Some seniors that are not rich but are middle class, there are middle class seniors who are paying taxes on their Social Security benefits. And of course, wealthy people are too. But this is a tax deduction for the middle class that are retired and receiving Social Security benefits. That's the one. You don't hear that talked about much, but it is in here. But these three big things are targeted, all three of those. No tax on tips is targeted at the middle class. It's targeted at the waitress that we had on Saturday night at Bourbon and Bones. She's excited about it and excited to know that it's going to go back to the beginning of the year. It's going to go back. It's going to be retroactive. And I could get into a whole explanation on that too about, since the government, they already took your money in withholding, how you could get that back. But I think, I'd be getting into the weeds and probably lose some people on that. But those are good things. But those are for the middle class. That's who's going to benefit from this. If we would have let the tax cuts expire, everyone would be paying more, including the middle class, and that wouldn't have been good. Now, here's the thing, though. These new cuts, the overtime, the no tax on tips, and I'm not sure about the seniors, but the first two, those sunset in like 2028 or 2029. So, but here's the thing: when it comes 2028, and people in the middle class have been enjoying this no tax on overtime and no tax on tips, do you think they're gonna vote to make it permanent then? Yeah, they just can't vote on making it permanent now. But who is going to want to come back in 2028 from either party and saying, sorry about that, we gave you a break for a minute, but we're going to have to start taxing your tips again? That wouldn't be a good thing, right? To get reelected and stuff. Nobody's going to want to say that.
From everything that I'm seeing here,
Yes.
the wealthy corporations and people do receive the most cuts. And this is all what ChatGPT.
You're talking about dollar amount?
Percentages and just in general. It says, I mean, this is pretty much like just quick summary, but a majority of the tax cuts do go to large corporations and wealthier people.
They're not new tax cuts though. They're already that's not new. Those are existing already in the code. And you got to remember, 50% of the households don't pay any tax whatsoever, or pay a very, very tiny percentage.
So high-income households and corporations mostly negatively affected if the bill were not to go through.
Well, of course. They pay more in taxes.
So if it were not to go through, the least affected would be the low-income households.
Dude, but you gotta look at it in perspective that the lower income household that's only paying $2,000 a year in taxes, that they're gonna, their taxes will go up $1,000. That here, like you can only cut so much, or give them a break up to so much, and they do get it. They do get.
So from what ChatGPT is saying, that pretty much. Mm-hmm. It would. So if the bill does not pass, the people that would be the most negatively impacted were going to be your top 1% and corporations. Your low income would keep benefits, lose small tax cuts, and then your middle class would keep a lot more benefits. And
well, of course, there's nothing for them when you're at the bottom. If they're not paying, if you're on Medicaid, you're not paying income taxes, man. So, like, yeah, if the tax cuts expired, it's not going to affect them. What it does affect is the people that are the employers, the ones hiring people. You can't expect people that, but it does happen. People on the low end of the income scale do also get money back that they don't pay in. And those are tax credits, not tax deductions. A tax credit is a totally different thing. So you have to look more at the middle class and where the middle class is, because I can tell you that for me, that in paying, how taxes affected me was, there'd be some tax break. But at like 250,000 or higher, it would be phased out, and I wouldn't even get a break.
So it says that. So this is the theory if it were not to go through. It says, a little bit of the trickle effect, but for the most part, a lot of the programs like Medicaid, SNAP, and housing assistance would thrive.
Would thrive? But you got to understand their definition. Their definition is getting more people, expanding the programs, and handing out more money, making it easier. Yeah, that's it. Instead of trying to make people, better people who have a higher self-esteem. They're contributing to society. They're taking care of their families and working towards that kind of thing versus just a handout. I mean, that's as good as ChatGPT and Grok are. There are still biases in there because that's what's out on the internet. It's just collecting that stuff. So sometimes you got to work with that a little bit. And, you know, my 24 years in the financial business, this is my wheelhouse. This is the shit that I know, and I know deep, and I know very, very well. And again, you're giving people money back with these child tax credits and things. There were some increases in that. Wasn't there an increase in either the child tax credit in this bill?
Yes, I do believe I read that.
Okay, well, again, and here's the thing. When you say negatively affect the rich person, the rich have enough money that if they let the taxes cuts expire, they're still going to be okay.
Yeah.
They're still going to be okay.
Yeah.
Either way, they're going to be okay. But the middle class would get hit. So I think the assessment saying, oh, it would affect them the most.
I mean, that's
they're just right. No, again, they're just saying it. You're not wrong, and for pulling it up and looking. But I'm trying to get to the nuance behind this, so that people can understand this and what it means. What did it say about the child tax credit?
So the increase from 1,000 to 2,000 per child. And then it was capped at 1,400.
And again, that $1,000 on your taxes. See, a deduction is about for every dollar of deductions, you get about 30 cents, roughly, give or take. Just use the 30 cents.
Yeah.
If it's a credit, it's dollar for dollar. So when somebody gets a credit like this, and in this case, an additional $1,000 credit, that's $1,000 that family.
But they put a cap on it, so it's only refundable up to, I think it was a percentage or whatever. So 1,400.
That's additional.
But it says only refundable up to.
Where did I say the? Where did I see the additional at?
That's up here. I'm not sure where you read additional.
Yeah, additional child tax credit.
Called the additional child tax credit, but it's the refundable portion is capped at 1,400. That's just what they call. So you're actually only getting, or at least it's capped for a portion. I mean, you're getting a majority of it, but it is capped. And
it doesn't give us the dollar amounts on there either. And what I mean by that is it doesn't give us the income amounts. That's what I mean. For like phase out of families making 500,000 don't get that.
Income phase out begins at 200,000.
There you go.
400,000 maybe.
That's what I'm looking for. See what I mean?
Not necessarily, no.
I'm just saying, like, the income phase out that, like, wealthy families are not getting that child tax credit.
Gotcha.
Because it's phased out.
Okay, it begins at 200,000 for single and 400,000 for married. Gotcha.
And that's gonna like end at like 300,000 or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like you only get part of it. So instead of 2,000, if you make over 200,000 but less than 300,000, you're gonna get 1,500 instead of 2,000 or whatever. That's how the phase out works.
Gotcha.
And then it's just gonna be gone. But that's my point is. Like the wealthy people, and somebody said, well, $200,000, that's a lot of money. Dude, that is not a lot of money in New York City or San Francisco. It just isn't. It's not, like 2 income families. When I was a financial advisor, and we're going back 10 years, I would say middle class families that I worked with, they all made, a 2-income household was making over $100,000. And probably I would say in the $130,000 area up to maybe $200,000. because at 130,000, here's what you got. You got a Jeep worker,
Okay.
making 70, and then Jeep workers love nurses. I don't know what it was, but a lot of Jeep workers were married to nurses, brother. And a nurse is making another 50, 60 grand.
Mhm.
So there's your $130,000. And that was your middle class. But that was that area. So it's different everywhere. But just, $100,000 used to be a big deal. And it's not the same big deal. To me, the number now, the new $100,000 is $250. $250 is the new 100. Especially, talking about two income families.
I'm just looking something up. I'm
Yeah,
just
no,
curious
I'm
because
curious.
I
No,
do
what do you
remember
got?
because I do remember them saying that they weren't including the no tax on tips. So I'm kind of curious as to whether or not it is actually in there.
Yeah, see how I said it sunsets in 2028?
Yeah.
No, that would be in the news. If that got removed,
But I thought I
it would
saw
be
something.
okay.
That's why
and
I
I'm
was
telling
looking
you,
it up.
that hasn't happened yet. Because I promise you, because that was such a big Trump promise,
Exactly.
they would be saying, Congress just fucked over Trump and
Yeah.
took away one of his biggest promises. And Trump would be out there yelling at them saying, don't you take that out. That's my people. Because he just promoted it the other day at the White House.
Okay.
And he had the woman there that actually, like he said, he was at Mar-a-Lago, maybe? Or he was at a restaurant, Mar-a-Lago or wherever he was at. And he was talking to a waitress, and he's asking her how she's doing, and she brought up, about it, and gave the idea of no tax on tips. And he said, Trump in his way that he does things like, what did you just say? That's a beautiful thing. No tax on tips. And he ran, but he gives her credit. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
It's just cute how he does that. And then he had her at the White House. Like he had other people there that represented, he had an auto worker there that was going to benefit from the, no tax on overtime. And this guy used to be a Democrat and then switched parties, and look, the Democrat Party should wake the fuck up. It used to be probably 80-20, maybe 90-10. It always seemed like the majority of union members were Democrats. That is not the case, man. When I was a journeyman laborer not too many years ago, and when Trump, during Trump's first election, and in Ohio, about 50% of the union members of all different unions, but about 50% voted for Donald Trump. Now, on the job site, here's the thing. People kept their mouth shut. Most Trump supporters didn't say shit. But I was the guy who had Trump shit on his, cooler and would take it in there. It's like, because I didn't, me, I didn't give a fuck. I didn't give two fucks. I just didn't care what I would say. But other people would come up to me later, yeah, I like what you said in the lunchroom, man. Yeah, I'm all for that. But they didn't want to say it. They just didn't want to deal with it. You know what I mean? They weren't really political people. They didn't want to debate people or get in arguments. And I totally get that, man. I just totally do. And I think that's why it surprised so many people, because you just didn't see it. It wasn't out in the open how many people were really supporting Trump until the numbers came in. And he's only increased those numbers with, blue collar workers. I mean, he has. So whatever people think about, how Trump employed people at different places and, or fought against unions or, with his hotels or whatever the case is, as president, he's done pretty much, I mean, even the unions are saying so. More for them than anybody else. The other people just took their votes for granted. And Trump did not take the votes for granted. He went after the votes, and that's why it's a different Republican Party now. But again, I've been trying to figure out in the bill here, you know, where some of this stuff is coming from, and is it actually supported? And I haven't been able to find it, and nobody has been able to show me. And in their posts and comments, they're not doing that. They're not saying, okay, this is going to increase and this is going to hurt. This is why it's going to hurt low-income people. You know, some people are going to lose their SNAP benefits. Really? How are they going to lose them? And I'm not saying some people won't. But are they losing their SNAP benefits because, what, they're not going to fill out the form? Who is that on? Is that really too much to ask that some people either have some type of work requirement? And there were some work requirement changes. If you're like able-bodied, like there was a cap to the age, and now they moved the cap up. So if you're in your 40s and 50s and you're able-bodied, you have to put in the 20 hours of work just like the 20-year-old or 35-year-old does. But there was an age there that I saw.
Gotcha.
It's things like that. That's what I found out is really changing. It's the requirements.
So the strict work requires a tighter eligible rules. According to Congressional Budget Office, up to 60 million people could lose Medicaid coverage.
And that's the number I said. I've seen anywhere from 5 million to 16 million. Everybody cites a different number because they don't know. They don't know. And nobody's trying to starve people. Okay?
Yeah, I'm not. Well, I don't think a lot of people are trying to do certain things, but I think just because of certain, like, what do they call it, the butterfly effect or whatever? Like, if one thing happens, eventually it's going to trickle down and affect other people in different ways. Whether or not they were wanting to do it is one thing. Whether it will do it is another. Or at least that's how I'm taking it. So less funding for net hospital.
That's so funny on the tax benefits, though. It's like, how can you give a $50,000 a year tax cut to somebody who's making $25,000? I mean,
no, they were just
they're paying $1,500 in taxes,
They were just paying the top 1%.
right? But the top 1% is different. It can be anywhere from
So
600,000 to 850,000. It depends on if you want to, if the top 1% you mean nationally or if you mean by state.
I'm just going off of what they're.
But no, I know what you're going off of. I'm just saying what I've looked into further, that what qualifies as top 1%, and I just round up. When I talk about the top 1%, I just round up and just say people making $1 million or more.
Gotcha.
But I qualify that. I tell people how I'm coming up with the number. And every budget was going to add to the deficit. And I don't like that. I don't. But neither part. Look, if we're screaming about making people who are able-bodied, if we're screaming about making them work 20 hours a week or donate 20 hours of their time to a charity or something like that, or, you know, picking up trash, I don't know, whatever. If we're screaming about that, how can we make real cuts? How can we make cuts to stop spending? Some program has to be eliminated. That's a nice program to have, but when you don't have extra money, you don't have it. And I know this is such a simplistic way to look at it, but some people, and I do know this to be true, there's a young person that I know that, you know, him and his fiance, they're both going to school. One's off of school now and will be going back to school in a year. But anyways, you know, they're young people. They're not making a ton of money, but they're both working, right? Okay. And so they are more on a budget.
Yeah.
Now, you're probably on a kind of, you may, some people budget, some people don't, but you some kind of a budget. But I would guess that the biggest impact for you in the last year hasn't been cutting expenses. What you've benefited from is increasing your skill level and making more money. And your budget has changed in a positive way.
Yeah, but that has nothing to do with like the tax cuts or anything for
No,
me.
I'm not talking about the tax cuts now.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
just talking about in general how you're
I mean, but that's
just overall financial situation.
I mean, yeah, but that's gonna be the same story for pretty much anyone.
That's the point. That's
whether or not they're
good
gonna
what you're
wanna
doing. Dude.
Yeah, but we're kind of forced into it basically.
What do you mean?
Because you can't just, or at least in talking to a lot of people my age, like you're forced to have a side hustle nowadays. Like you can't just be a nurse or whatever job you're gonna want to be and just live like properly.
but
like that's just like
yeah,
you can't
but
a lot of
okay.
the people my age can't own homes nowadays. Like a lot of them can't afford
get
to
all
own
that.
homes. And
I
stuff like
get all
So,
that.
like,
I'm just talking about your own, but the improvement came from doing the side hustle, making more money versus just budgeting. Budgeting wasn't gonna help you.
w-
I'm saying your budget is better now because you have more money. Maybe you're working more, but it is what it is. And you guys aren't the first generation to do that.
but it's much different. It's like financially wise, or at least because like or at least
Okay.
again, maybe I'm wrong, but because the GDP or whatever it's called or whatever, but like it was a lot easier to support yourself grow like within the past than it is now, at least.
Yeah, that was true in the 60s.
Um,
It was the 60s that were the best, dude.
I honestly, I'm just going off. The
No,
top.
I'm just
not, really-
yeah,
not
no, I'm
100%
just
sure.
telling you where you could have one of the parents stay at home
Mhm.
and the other one work. You could have a car and a home and a refrigerator full of groceries. This is the 1960s. The 70s weren't that great. We had stagflation. The market sucked, everything, and then things got better again in the 80s. But things switched
Mhm.
too, with more women working and wanting to work and then making more money. And now look, all of that is true, but every generation has had different things to live with.
Yeah.
You go back to the 1920s or, comparing that out, like, yeah, I'm not saying that's
It's just it's hard to compare those two times, or at least in my opinion, it's hard to compare the 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s to today. It's just like because like
yeah,
again,
life is better. The poor live better now than the rich did in the 1920s.
yeah, probably.
Yeah.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't think I can disagree with that. But whether or not like the overall quality of life in general, because like there was obviously not. I don't know what the number of people there was back then than there is now. I don't know. I guess there's just so many.
Dramatic difference,
There's just so much different that things that affect. Because like although if you want to like come outside on the broad scale, like yeah, I'm sure a lot of things that you say probably are true. But like when it comes to like like people actually living their lives like the day-to-day basis, I feel like it's a lot bigger of a dramatic difference than probably what you believe. So
I'm not.
I could be wrong. That's just like off the top of my head.
I'm not disputing that there's a difference. I'm just saying that that life has circumstances, and sometimes things are good, sometimes things aren't so good. And what I do and the message that I have is I keep plowing forward. I keep going. And that's like, I don't dwell in the misery of, oh, it's so hard, it's so tough, I got to do this, and you don't do that. Look, I'm giving you compliments. You know what I mean? You're hustling. You're making, you're setting the groundwork. for yourself to do really, really well.
100%. No, I agree, but I feel like it's very so like people. Like, I got lucky. I got super lucky. Let's both admit it here. Like if I would have never met you, I probably wouldn't gone down this line of work. I would have probably still been working 40 hours at the bank. So I like, and that's very like a very common thing, or for like again the people that I've talked to.
Dude,
and stuff
but there's
like that,
a
like,
reason that you got lucky.
yeah, for sure.
You
for
know
sure.
what I mean?
No, and I'm not
Okay,
disagreeing with
all
that,
right,
and that's why
all
I
right.
want to bring that point up, because like a lot of people don't get the opportunity to get that, because there's a lot of other things you have to worry about.
Yeah, but you got to keep putting yourself out there so you have the opportunity to
For
get
sure,
lucky.
I'm not disagreeing with that.
Yeah,
I'm not
that's the
disagreeing with
difference.
that.
People,
But like,
but you got to start. You got to start. They're not starting, man.
no, for
There
sure,
was
for
some
sure.
desire that you had to do better and have more.
Yeah,
and
yeah, but
you didn't just settle.
but I feel like it's, or at least especially the life we were told we were supposed to have as kids
yes.
is like they fucked over a lot. So like a lot of these
Dude.
things, like where
Yes.
they're doing a lot of tax cuts and stuff like that, like a lot of it, like yeah, oh, it's gonna benefit the middle class and lower class, but at like it really won't in a way. I don't know if I'm describing that very well or whatever,
I
but
don't
like
know.
I just think like yeah, the black and white, it says it's going to benefit them, but in reality, when the people that are living day to day, it's just it's not going to be any better. Yeah, the
Okay, then here comes the other. Here's the other part that is the difference between conservatives and liberals. For conservatives, we believe that that nobody's coming to save you, that it's up to you to save you. And liberals are looking for the government to help and solve their problem.
but isn't that what
You
the
have to
government's like?
no, it's not. It's not for that. It was never meant to be that.
Yeah, but I mean, whether or not it was never meant to be something or not, it is where we're at right now, right?
And it's not working. We're in debt. We're spending money we don't have, and that's
Yeah,
where.
but that's
look,
going to
this is-
happen no matter what. I mean,
But it shouldn't. It can't. It can't continue on forever. There is a tipping point at some point where we are fucked. And then what? And it seems like we're not that far away.
no.
And it
No, but I honestly,
And I blame both.
In my opinion, I believe that we need it to tip for the solution to come.
I don't know how that works out though. That's a bad
No, 100%.
world
Like-
thing
like peop-
happening.
like
then
people-
there
like-
might be war because of that, dude.
Yeah, I mean,
You know
but
what I
like,
mean?
Like they always say, I mean, horrible things need to happen before major change happens.
Yeah, and some of us would like to, stop getting to that, to solve the problem before we get to that point.
I don't know.
And I don't know if we will. I'm just saying. But what I was getting to on the budget thing is
Mhm.
with the young couple going back is I know that like he can't afford every TV service.
Mhm.
So maybe he has YouTube and HBO and Netflix. I think he gets one from his parents. He piggybacks off that. That's
Yeah.
what y'all do. You piggyback off
100%.
someone's and do that. But one of them, I think it was Netflix, he's going to be getting rid of because we always talk about shows we're watching and, I better watch that before I let that
service
Netflix go.
Yeah.
And that's my point. I know it's a simplistic way to look at it, but that's the best way I can explain it is, so we all have these budget things. Well, the government does too. And having the Netflix, having 4 television services
Mhm.
is really super nice. But the bottom line is you're not going to die if you have to get rid of one because you can't afford it. And it's more important to pay your electric bill than it is to have that TV
service.
service. That was all I was getting to
Gotcha. Okay.
is just how a budget works. But, another way to handle it. Maybe some people have the time, maybe they don't. Maybe they don't have the time. They can only handle one job and while going to school. I get that stuff. But I'm just saying this whole idea of people budgeting, it's good. It's good for the government to do, but there's another component, and that's to make more. The problem on the government side is when we do make more, when we do create more revenue, and that more revenue, that was wrong, doesn't come from increasing taxes, because when you increase people's taxes, some of the things that you increase their taxes on, they have a choice to do or not. Very simple explanation. If you raise the capital gains tax to a certain point, I, as an investor, can say, I have enough money. I'm not going to sell that right now. I'm going to wait, see what happens. I can wait 3 years, or I can borrow money and use that as leverage and borrow the money, because I don't want to sell that now because I don't want to pay taxes. That's the kind of shit that rich people do. And they're not like cheating. That's just the rules. Those are just the laws and what's available for people to be able to do.
Yeah.
So you revenue, and there's a point where you can lower taxes and you won't increase revenue. We haven't hit that yet. But what people have been unable to explain when you show it to them is, if I'm wrong, then why, after the tax cut, did the U.S. government take in more money? So the problem for the government part is on the spending side. The problem on individual side is not just spending. For some, it is. They're spending, you're spending more than you're taking in. And I've been there as a young person. I got myself into financial difficulty. I spent more than I had. I don't have those problems anymore. I focus on making more, not on, trying to get this or save $10 here, or, look, if that's what you have to do, that's what you have to do. If you have to juggle your thermostat to make your household budget work, sucks. But I can tell you, I wouldn't want to do that for long. I'd be doing something else,
But then that's where you run into the situation where a lot of lower income people are always going to turn into violence, what's that word? Jesus Christ.
No, what?
Well, that's like one of the main reasons that lower income people tend to be more
Commit
criminals.
crimes.
Criminals, yes, commit crimes to get that extra
They're
bit of money.
stealing it instead of working for it.
Because
then what? You don't get to just do that. That's not acceptable.
But I don't know. It's
so so instead of them robbing us, we should pay them off.
No,
Okay.
I'm just saying it because of the way everything is set. I don't know. Again, this is just going off the top of my head, but you're kind of almost in a way enabling it. It wasn't that a whole because you know how
we are enabling them now. That's what happens. You enable people and you keep them down, and they.
But over history, isn't that one of the biggest points that a lot of people from African American descent have, is that a lot of those communities and those people were pretty much put in those situations where they were all kind of basically grouped up in areas where it was harder to make a living and get through life. So then that kind of
I'm not an expert on this, but if you go back some years, there was a time when, as far as civil rights went, that black people were treated very poorly. Never a dispute there. But there was a time then when they were building their own communities and had their own banks, and they were better off. They were better off than when they ended up with the government. And the government, they're gonna.
But so why did the government get involved? Would you know? I'll look into it if not.
Who you know what? We'll address this the next one, because I got it, but I can't pull it up right now.
No, that's fine.
But there was a president. I'd have to look.
Yeah, I was gonna say
there was a president
into it. Yeah.
that used the N-word and just basically said, we're gonna keep them, by doing this. He was the one that introduced the social programs. We're going to keep them under our thumb for, decades to come. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, they had him recorded that he said this in private.
Wow.
Dude, oh, it'll stun you because you haven't heard it, obviously.
think no.
No, it'll stun you, dude. But that's the thing, like, remember, you can be smart, but you have two things. You have knowledge and you have experience. And knowledge is about being smart. But it just takes time. It's hard to get a lot of experience in a short amount of time. Now, you can try to do that. You could try to do more to shorten that up a little bit, but it's still going to take some time.
Yeah.
Okay. And maybe it's just life experience and having, lived through something versus reading about it.
Yeah.
But that's where wisdom is both. So that's kind of my answer as far as, there's just information that some people have not had ever given to them, not because it's not important or that you're not interested in it.
Just because there's so much.
There's so much.
Yeah.
And you've had other things that were important, and you're trying to do those things. And that's what I'm trying to do here is sprinkle some of this other stuff out there, because if your mind changes or if you view something different, I want that to happen because you change that viewpoint based on more information and information that you believe and trust, and that you come to conclusions. And sometimes we come to conclusions, and then if we add something else in, we have to come to a different conclusion, right?
Yeah.
It just is what it is. But I want it to happen that way, because then it truly is in people. We can't just talk people into it or convince them in a debate. That will never change anyone. And that's why I don't like looking up stuff for people, or when people say, well, where's your source for that? I'd rather you find it yourself, the source. And look at people. It'd be nice if people looked at things and said, this is what I believe. And what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to try to prove that what I believe is wrong. And you either will or you'll prove yourself right. But if you just try to prove yourself right, well, you always will every single time. But if you give yourself a chance to prove yourself wrong and look specifically for that, you're going to get truly a wider range of information. And that takes reading about other people's opinions, theories, or whatever. Like, even though there are certain liberal economists that I can't stand, still read their shit, dude. It's the only way to have balance and understanding.
So you don't have a bias on it,
There's enough time now that you can take what somebody said and then, well, they said this in 2014. Well, this is what's happened since.
Gotcha.
So, what they said didn't work out that way. And then sometimes they try to just rewrite history, which is just incredible because it's just repeated.
It always rewrites itself
over and over and over again. It's absolutely nuts, man. It really is. But we got to be done. We're going a little long here, but it's fun to talk about and discuss. And I love that you share on the show with me, because that helps me explain it to everyone else. If I can do that, for you. But again, my goal is not to change your mind. It's just information, and for you to have information that you might not have to make up your own mind and come to your own conclusion on how you feel about it. But, like I said, this kind of stuff, there's a lot out there that is just flat. It's not that it's a small part true, but they exaggerate it, like they accuse Trump of doing, to a point where, man, that's not true at all, man. That's not going to happen. We're not kicking people, and they're still bringing up Social Security. Have you read one thing about Social Security, dude?
No, I actually
None.
didn't see any of it.
None.
Yeah.
But they keep talking about Social Security. Republicans are going to take your Social Security away. It's not in there. It's just not in there. But they're going to continue to talk about it to scare people. And, well, like I said, this bill isn't perfect. I said before, I wanted more cuts. But this is where we're at. We got to decide as a country and as a people, what are we willing to support? What politicians are we willing to support to actually get things in line? We can only do so much, and I'm for doing that. And I'm for doing whatever we can to increase revenues. But at some point, at least with the country, it's not about increasing revenues. It honestly is about cutting expenses. And we haven't done that. And the juggernaut that Trump would like and the juggernaut that I would like is, I think if we did do that, this economy would take off like never been seen in the history of the United States. If we got our shit together, if we got those cuts. But nobody's willing to give up anything. Somebody's got to be willing to give up something. There's got to be the Netflix somewhere on the list. I know that was a simple.
I get what you're saying, though.
But you know what? That has to be somewhere on the list, right? It's a nice thing to have. It's a nice benefit to offer someone or parents for their kids or whatever. But we can't do it right now. You know, there was some year when dad got laid off, you didn't get to go on a fucking family vacation. You went on family vacation the previous year. You went to Florida, went to the beach, maybe went to Disney. But this year you couldn't do it because dad was laid off for 3 months, right? It just is, man. It'd be nice to go. It'd be nice to have. But it wasn't worth it for dad to put $3 or $4 grand on the credit card to then, you're not going to see him. He's not coming to your ball game because he's working, paying taxes on his overtime to pay that bill off. That this year you just have to skip Disney. That's all I'm saying, and we're not getting that from either side. From either side, we're not getting it. And they're not, the sad part is I brought up earlier, they're not even trying anymore. They're not even trying to work together. It'd be one thing if Democrats made an attempt and Republicans said, fuck you. But that didn't happen. Then I would be yelling about Republicans, and I would have no problem doing that. But that didn't happen. They didn't even try. You got to say, be involved. If you don't like the bill and you're a Democrat, you should be doing the same thing as a Republican that doesn't like the bill. Trying to work with them, get involved in the committees and stuff, and offer other solutions and trying to get that. But again, we are at different objectives. One's trying to give more money away. And look, let's be honest. They all use taxpayer money to buy votes for their party. It's undisputable that they both decide to do that kind of shit. And there we go. That's where we're at on the budget for today. If that helps anybody, my fucking rambling, whatever it is. But it wasn't too bad. Right?
No, not at all. No, I liked it. I enjoyed the conversation.
Good. I did too. All right, there we go. This is the Outlaw Apostle Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Neff. I'm the fucking guy. Let's get off to a great week.